The airplane shook just enough to make passengers glance up, but not enough to cause panic. Yet even without turbulence, tension was already thick in the cabin. A tall, sharply dressed CEO sat in first class, her heels crossed neatly, her expression carved from ice. Across from her, wearing a faded uniform and nervously wringing his hands, sat a janitor, an older man with tired eyes and a quiet dignity that didn't match his station. Only a few people noticed the moment she rose, stepped forward, and fired him right there, mid-flight, her voice low but cutting. But those who saw it would never forget it. Nor would they forget what happened just moments after, when her pale, trembling daughter clutched her throat, gasped for air, and whispered the words that shattered the CEO's world, "Mom, he saved my life." If you believe in kindness, second chances, and humanity, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe. It truly helps more than you know. The story of how everything led to that moment began long before the plane left the ground, starting with a man named Liam Carter, a single dad who had learned to survive life one humble step at a time. Liam had once dreamed of becoming an aircraft mechanic, but dreams had a way of dissolving when life demanded something more immediate. His wife, Anna, had passed away when their daughter, Lily, was only 6. Overnight, Liam became a full-time father, part-time worker, and relentless believer that he had to make it through for the sake of the little girl who looked up at him as if he hung the moon. Years passed, and life carved gentle exhaustion into the corners of his eyes. To keep a roof over their heads and food on the table, he took whatever jobs came his way. Lately, that meant working as a part-time janitor for Skybound Airlines. He didn't mind the work. Cleaning was honest. Simple. Predictable. And predictability was something he desperately needed while raising a teenage daughter who was struggling with late-onset asthma and anxiety after her mother's death. Despite setbacks, Liam kept a quiet hope alive. If he worked hard enough, if he kept every paycheck, maybe he could finally afford better treatment for Lily, maybe even send her on the school trip she'd been begging to go on. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away, a different world existed, one of wealth, ambition, and high-rise success. Victoria Hale, CEO of Skybound Airlines, ruled her domain with precision sharper than any blade. Every move she made was calculated. Every decision purposeful. She was known not for kindness, but for results. Her schedule never faltered. Her image never cracked. And her career, flawless as glass, reflected no mistakes. Except one. A secret mistake that slept under her roof, her daughter, Amelia. Amelia was 17, intelligent, deeply sensitive, and quietly struggling. For years, doctors had whispered concerns about her severe peanut allergy, one so intense that even airborne traces could trigger violent reactions. But Victoria was always too busy, too distant, too focused on empire building to notice how fragile her daughter truly was. Amelia adored her mother but lived with the ache of invisibility. But fate had strange ways of pulling worlds together. The day of the flight, Flight 92, began with sunlight glowing softly across the tarmac. Liam had been assigned one simple responsibility: ride the morning flight to Chicago as a janitorial standby, primarily to monitor cabin cleanliness and assist in case of spills or clean up emergencies. The pay wasn't great, but it added a little extra to the monthly bills. He kissed Lily before leaving, promising he'd be home by evening. As passengers boarded, Liam stepped onto the plane with his small cleaning kit, nodding politely to everyone he passed. He didn't expect to be sitting anywhere near first class, but seating shortages meant they placed him temporarily in an unused corner seat until crew reassigned him later. That's when he noticed her, Victoria Hale, already seated with cold focus, reviewing documents on her tablet. Her daughter sat beside her, earbuds in, eyes distant and tired. Amelia looked like someone who was drowning quietly, someone Liam's fatherly instincts pulled him to watch just a little more closely. When the plane took off, everything felt normal. The cabin lights dimmed. People settled into entertainment screens. Coffee was served. Minute after minute drifted by peacefully, until a tiny, seemingly insignificant moment changed everything. A teenage passenger seated behind Amelia decided to open a snack bag of mixed nuts he had brought from home. He didn't know the danger. He didn't know the severity. No one told him. And the scent drifted forward unnoticed, until it touched Amelia's lungs. At first, she only rubbed her throat. Then her breathing changed. Faster. Shallower. Her shoulders tensed. Her lips paled. Liam's eyes caught it instantly, the same terrifying signs he had seen in Lily during her worst asthma attacks. But this was different. Sharper. More deadly. Amelia tried to speak, but only a strangled whisper escaped. She reached toward her mother, but Victoria was too caught up in an urgent email to notice the storm rising right beside her. Liam rose without thinking. He wasn't a doctor. He wasn't a paramedic. But he was a father, one who had spent years learning to recognize fear in a child's eyes. He hurried to Amelia, kneeling beside her, gently tilting her face toward him to check her airway. Her throat was swelling rapidly. He turned toward the nearest flight attendant, raising his voice with urgency. She acted quickly, rushing to retrieve the emergency medical kit. But the EpiPen, Amelia's lifeline, wasn't there. Worse, Amelia's personal EpiPen wasn't in her bag. Victoria had removed it earlier, insisting it wasn't necessary for such a short flight. A decision that now felt like a noose. Liam didn't panic. He remembered something from one of Lily's doctors, a method of slowing the reaction just long enough to keep air moving until help arrived. He instructed Amelia to lean forward. He steadied her trembling body. He spoke in a calm, steady tone to reassure her. His voice was the anchor she clung to as her world blurred. Passengers began to panic. Victoria finally looked up, her face whitening as she realized her daughter wasn't just uncomfortable, she was fighting for air. She demanded help, shouting orders, her polished composure shattering instantly. But the cabin crew was already moving, radioing for emergency clearance, preparing the cabin for priority landing. Through the chaos, Liam held Amelia's shaking hands, keeping her conscious, whispering encouragement. Her breathing rasped painfully, but his steady guidance helped keep her airway open just long enough. When the plane finally touched down, paramedics rushed aboard. Amelia was whisked away to the nearest hospital. And Liam, exhausted and covered in the evidence of assisting a near-fatal reaction, sat heavily in his seat, heart pounding as he prayed the girl survived. But before he could catch a single breath, before he could even wipe the sweat from his forehead, Victoria Hale approached him. Her daughter had been taken away only minutes earlier, and yet, the first thing she did was glare down at him with cold fury. She accused him of mishandling the situation. Of overstepping. Of creating unnecessary panic. She claimed he disrupted passengers. That he wasn't qualified. That he didn't belong in first class. And right there, in front of flight crew and passengers still trembling from fear, she fired him. Liam didn't fight back. He simply nodded, gathered his small bag, and stepped off the plane, broken, humiliated, and uncertain how he would face Lily at home. But fate wasn't finished. Hours later, Victoria Hale sat beside her daughter in the hospital room. Machines beeped steadily. Amelia's face was pale but peaceful. When she finally woke, she blinked weakly and looked around the room. Her voice barely a whisper, she asked a single question. "Where's the man, the one who helped me?" Victoria froze. She explained coldly that he was just a janitor, someone who had made things worse. But Amelia shook her head, tears forming in her eyes as she whispered words her mother would never forget. "He saved my life." Those words cracked something deep inside the iron CEO. And when the doctor entered moments later and explained bluntly that if not for the quick intervention of the janitor, Amelia might not have survived long enough to reach the hospital. Victoria felt the weight of her mistake crash down on her chest. The guilt was suffocating. Without hesitation, Amelia insisted they find the men. She refused to rest until they thanked him properly. "He looked at me like I mattered," she murmured. "Like my life was important." Victoria's throat tightened. When was the last time she had looked at her daughter that way? It took hours, but eventually a staff member located Liam's address from his employment file. That evening, as rain streaked down the city's windows, a black car pulled up to a modest apartment building far from the world of luxury Amelia was raised in. Liam opened the door expecting no one. But there they stood, Victoria, humbled, and Amelia, still recovering but alive. When Amelia saw him, she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him in a fragile, grateful embrace. Her voice trembled against his shoulder as she repeated the words she had whispered on the plane. "You saved my life." And in that moment, everything shifted. Victoria apologized. Truly apologized. Not the polished, rehearsed kind of apology CEOs mastered,